Dr. George Cook had already referred to the people behind this publication, and may I very quickly, at my own admiration and tribute to all those who first conceived this idea and through very hard work succeeded in bringing it to fruition this morning. Now, I have been allotted the rather formidable task of trying to say something in 10 minutes about a 10-year relationship. Now, the problem there is then not what to say. I could go on saying for 1 hour. But the issue is what not to say. Because in such a rich field of experience, what do you say in 10 to 15 minutes the most? So let me see whether I could cope with that challenge this morning. I would first start with what was it like working with her. Dr. Nihal Jai Vikrama, whom I'm very happy to see before us in the audience today, and I were speaking to each other just before this function, and we realized that we are the only two people alive today, whether in the cabinet of the time or all the officials of every ministry practically, that worked with her. We seem to be, to the best of our knowledge, only two remaining standing or seated at this time. So what I would try to bring to bear would be as far as possible, as far as I humanly can, an unbiased recapitulation of what it was like first to start off with, work with her. What was her work ethic like? What was her attitude to work? Now I will take both periods together because in the earlier period I was a little distant, except for the times when I had to act for Bradman, when Bradman was away. So I did get more than a glimpse of her first administration and how she functioned. But of course I had much more intimate official relationship with her for 7 years in the second administration, and also she had one unwavering rule that Mr. W.T. Jayasinghe, who was the Secretary to the Ministry of Defence and Foreign Affairs, and I could not be out of the country at the same time because we had to act for each other. So by the time the 7-year period was over, in addition to being Secretary to the Prime Minister, I had been acting Secretary to the Ministry of Defence and Foreign Affairs some 26 times, including sometimes for long periods when WT was away at the UN or somewhere. So I've had very diverse, intimate look at everything. Now, she was also Prime Minister, Minister of Defence and Foreign Affairs, and Minister of Planning. So the first problem was the allocation of time, because she had to see her secretaries regularly, and she wanted it. She was not a person, she was hands-on. Hands-on not in the sense of micromanagement. Hands-on in terms of a sense of responsibility, that she had to be aware. And so we had to schedule one day of the week for Dr. H.A.D.S. Gunasekara, Secretary Planning, one day, and these are 4 to 4 hour sessions for Mr. W.T. Jayasinghe and the senior officials of the Foreign Ministry. Then maybe once in 2 weeks or so with the Inspector General of Police and the Defence authorities, because he was also Minister of Defence, sometimes the Commander of the Army, and so on. I think it was General Sepal Artigala, and you had to schedule. I was, of course, part of the official household there. I had access, and the point about her was I had instant access at any time. So that was extremely helpful under these circumstances. And finally, we had a system of boxes. I think this is done in UK and so on. We had 2 or 3 boxes to which she and I had the keys, nobody else. And mind you, we didn't have large bureaucracies. In the Prime Minister's office, it consisted of one overworked secretary, one overworked assistant secretary, then the coordinating secretary, private secretary, additional private secretary who handled constituency affairs, social affairs, other youth affairs and so on. And the absolute load of the official thing, because don't forget, she was the executive prime minister. She, the president, the governor general and later the president was the constitutional head of state. So the net result of all this was, I for one used to have lunch at about 5 o'clock in the evening, and one has to have a sense of humor, because when I try to sit at the back, because there's a screen at the back of my room to hopefully eat something, the big window overlooks the garages of the Department of Inland Revenue. And I see all the Inland Revenue people streaming at the end of their day's work to their garages to go home. And I'm having lunch. Generally, one could not leave office because the work ethic, her work ethic and the work ethic of the public service at that time, not only me, that was the work ethic. We didn't leave until we cleared up. And actually, it was almost genetically impossible to do that. So that means, but I always, practically every day had sometimes 3 boxes, sometimes 2 boxes, rarely 1 box. On my way home to Vellavatta, I passed Temple Trees. And I used to drop off these boxes at about 8:30 in the night, sometimes 9. Locked. She has the keys, one set of keys. Even at that time, you can see the lights blazing in the conference room. That means she's still presiding at various meetings, because she normally picks the political kind of meetings. Because don't forget, she was also managing a difficult coalition with giants, political giants of the time, Dr. N.M. Pereira, Leslie Gunawardena, Dr. Colvina de Silva in the cabinet, Peter Kenneman, Moscow Wing, Communist Party in the cabinet. The SLFP itself was a coalition of sorts, of right, center and left. Say, you had Maitripal Sen Nayak and Felix Raj Bandaranaike and so on one side. You had T.B. Lankaratne, T.B. Subhasinghe, T.B. Tendukon and others on the other side. And you had, it was not easy to manage those relationships. And so with all that, she was very, very focused. So we had these long hours. One thing I want to tell you, and this has to be stated and recorded, I used to collect these boxes, hopefully call for these boxes on my way back to office at about 9:15 the next day. I can't think of one single day when the boxes were not attended to. Even some of the longer reports were read. I know they were read because there were sidelines, and certain area she has said, please speak or please discuss. So it was not a question of merely, yes, there were letters to be signed, true, but there were substantive papers where the whole thing had been analyzed on a minute sheet, and she had to give her mind to it and give a decision. And some involved reports, particularly some important reports from ambassadors abroad, some of them special reports. So this was and she was very diligent, very accessible, and at the same time, I have to say, she was very affable. I had never seen her, not with the public servants, her relationship with the public service was one of, and the public service with her was one of mutual deep respect. We talked on courteous, equal terms with each other. You could tell her anything. She would listen and argue back if necessary. Sometimes she prevailed. Sometimes we prevailed because she listened and she changed her views. That was what I thought was an ideal relationship. So that's a brief sketch of what it was to work with her. And now to get her achievements are well known. I don't have to talk about them. If you look at the domestic in the two terms, don't forget that was a time when globally, rather than globally, certainly in the Commonwealth and in Britain and so on, there was a belief that the commanding heights, that those are the terms used, commanding heights of the economy had to be under state control. And the Labour Party, as you know, the nationalisation, coal, steel, electricity, everything, the Labour governments did that in Britain. We followed suit because it was not merely copycatting Britain, but there was a belief at that time. Maybe because the post-colonial feeling that after about 450 years of loss of independence, one had to be little more centralized and be in control of things. It may be that. In Britain, I don't know why that was so. I can't tell you offhand. But anyway, so we have even today the People's Bank, the Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, at that time Steel Corporation, Hardware Corporation, State Trading Corporation, Tire Factory, you name it, it's a whole huge list. That will take 15 minutes to relate, so I'm just giving you a few snippets of what they were. Then this was not a question of introducing legislation, some kind of legislation or amendments to some acts. She drove structural change, which is not easy, takes time, effort. And these consist of, amongst other than fighting a insurgency, which is not change, but that was another unprecedented thing. Nobody had any idea how to handle that, and she was hands-on. That would take half an hour to 1 hour for me today, so I won't even try. In my book, in the something about governance, I can't now remember the title, doesn't matter. In Pursuit of Governance, I have written a little bit about that, but even that's not the complete story. That is amazing. And when the ministers were in panic, I saw that. And at one stage, she virtually had to shoo them off temple trees. And I remember her words here, for heaven's sake, get back to your ministries and wait there. You are spreading panic here. Those are her very words. And she sat at that big long dining table and went on and on and on. And I think this is only a woman. No man is capable of this. She saw that every person who came was fed, who came for the meetings. She took the trouble to see that that was done, and for some of those officers, whether the Army, Navy, Air Force, police or public servants, that might have been the only meal they've had for the last 12, 14 hours. Because they were working round the clock with curfews and police stations were being attacked and captured. All kinds of things were happening. And she brought that under control. So that's a big story in itself. But the structural changes was Amazingly, this family, Mr. Bandanayaka was part of the independence movement, and of course everybody remembers his famous speech on the occasion of independence under D.S.A. Nayaka's guidance and in the cabinet. So that was independence after 450 years. Then Mr. Bandanayaka, when he became Prime Minister, strengthened that independence by negotiating back the Trincomalee bases, the harbour and air base, and the Katunayake air base. So that was again a strengthening of independence and sovereignty. Mrs. Bandanayaka completed it. It struck me when I was thinking about this. She completed it by bringing the 1972 Republican Constitution. Whatever controversy we may have about certain sections, the main issue was that we delinked from the British Crown, and we had an autochthonous constitution with our own president. Honored chief guest and the keynote speaker at the first UN conference on women in Mexico City. She was honored by the ILO in asking her to open a new session and made the keynote address. She was awarded the series gold medal by the FAO. Although people were laughing and calling her Batalavati here, right? FAO realized her achievement in growing short-term crops and saving Sri Lanka from possible starvation. People only remembered the restrictions on weddings and so on. But the ILO awarded the series gold medal to her. Series is, I think, goddess of fertility, agriculture. So that's about all I could tell you in 10 to 15 minutes. But I don't want to leave this like ticking off a checklist. Give me 3-4 minutes to give you the flavor of what it was to work with her. In her first administration, many people said, "Oh, she is a housewife. She didn't even contest elections. She was in the Senate, and the government was run by other people, powerful ministers, and names were mentioned." So I don't want to mention names if possible, but that is something we did not see. You see, the point is, Margaret Thatcher in her memoirs says, politician or political leader's image is not made by him or her. That image is made by the media and by one's political opponents. And that is the image that sticks, not the real you. And that is so. That is not even in the first term, this so-called housewife. She was her own mistress. There was no question about it. How do I know? Because I was there. Now I am the only person alive who had seen a thing like this. Once Mr. Pieris Bandanayaka came and told, I was there. She wanted me to be present and said, "Madam, I want a young civil servant to head some important," he was a minister of local government and all kinds of things, to head some committee. She immediately interrupted me and said, "No, Felix, no young civil servants, no civil servants. You are trying to abolish the civil service. Find your people from somewhere else, not the civil service." And that was that. Then, that's one. There are so many. Then he wanted to call Mr. D.G. Dayaratna, the senior most civil servant, who was port commissioner at that time, class 1 of the post in class 1 of the Ceylon civil service. At that time, port commissioner managed the whole port. There was no port car cooperation, right? All the complexities of the port. Because there was a vacancy in the secretary's post in the cabinet. Secretary cabinet was vacant. So he told me, "Tell Mr. Dayaratna to come and see me because I want to offer as the senior most civil servant." So I asked him to come. Mr. Dayaratna came in his Tasso suit and she asked me to sit in. She said, Mr. Daratna, you are the most senior in the civil service, isn't it? She said, Madam, I think so. No, I checked. I think you are the most senior. Now, why I called you was to offer you the post of Secretary of Cabinet, because you are the most senior. The post is vacant. Mr. Daratna said, Madam, have you spoken about this to my minister? So she said, Minister Michael Sidwardhan. She said, no, I have not spoken, but I will tell Michael. Then he said, no, sorry, madam. If you have not spoken to my minister about this, I am sorry, I cannot continue with this conversation any longer. Now, see, this is a different age. That is the relationship with the political class and the administrative class at a particular time. And then she was, so anybody can get annoyed, can say, I won't give this man the post. No, she was very calm, she understood. He said, right, Ms. Daratna, Ms. Daratna, I will speak to Michael. Thank you. Thank you, and he left. So, today, most people wouldn't have given the man the post for being, they would have thought the man was cheeky or contemptuous or whatever the word you use, or arrogant. No, but that was what it was. That was what it was. And whether it's a good thing or bad thing is for each individual to decide. And, well, he got the post. We all, mind you, during the first administration. Then one final little thing about me. I was working most of the time in the so-called Senate office, today's Republic Square. Those it was Senate Square. And Bradman worked, unless I acted, Bradman worked from Temple Trees. She preferred to work from Temple Trees. And she always wore white. White sari, white blouse during that entire term up. For work, she never wore anything colored. That was another feature. I had written a letter to Mr. Roy Rajapaksa, official letter, in my capacity as Assistant Secretary, MP for Hakmana, a dark, very dark, almost black, swarthy, stocky individual. And he replied rudely. He gave me a rude reply. So I thought this man had misunderstood. So I made the language simpler and rewrote explaining further. This time he sent me a letter abusing me with words of filth. So now my problem was, rather than hurt ego, I did not understand how I got a response like this from this kind of letter. So I sent the papers to Bradman with a minute in the file. Can you see anything wrong in what I have said for me to elicit a reply like this? Bradman thought not, showed the file to the Prime Minister. And he told me, I've shown this file to the Prime Minister. This is utterly uncalled for. So we forgot about it. 1 month later, I was summoned to Temple Trees. Suddenly, I didn't know why. When I was called in, Bradman was seated with her, and my blood froze. There was Roy Rajapaksa seated opposite. She greeted me personally and said, oh, please sit, please take a seat. So now Roy Rajapaksa, now I am facing him. Roy Rajapaksa is not looking at me, I am not looking at Roy Rajapaksa. I am studying the table. I didn't have even a document. Right. So she was now concluding whatever they were discussing, and Roy Rajapaksa rose to go. Then she, from the file, fished out a file. I knew trouble. This was the file. He said, Mr. Rajapaksa, you have written an abusive letter to my Assistant Secretary. Why did you do that? No words came, mumbled something. Only mumblings came. But she knew not to twist the knife too much. She made a point. She said, Mr. Rajapaksa, I do not want you to read to treat public servants with disrespect, and certainly not public servants working in my office. So please do not repeat it. Yes, madam. Out. The point is, she took the trouble. This is mind you, first administration. And how old was I at that time? Something like 28 years. This trip of a youth. Here was a Prime Minister taking this trouble to do that. So that shows character, isn't it? That is why I want to say the flavor of things. And finally, I want to just flag. There are so many things to say, but how she was treated abroad. Yes, there's a thing called protocol. When you go on state visits, there are the guards of honor, the national anthems, all that is there. But I will relate 2 or 3 instances. You decide whether this was normal protocol or what was it? Was there something more, and why? Say, take a visit to Thailand, state visit to Thailand. The King and Queen Sirikit was away in Chiang Mai. So after the negotiation with the Prime Minister, Kukrit Pramod, I think, was the Prime Minister, very erudite person. The King wanted to host a dinner in his honor. So we were sent off by plane to Chiang Mai. And it was very intimate, no crowd. It's a personal dinner. And during that, when we were chatting, the 2 princesses, I think the current king, King Vajiralongkorn, was away, out of the country. There were the 2 princesses. 2 princesses were brought in and introduced to her. Now, that is not protocol. That is personal. That's not protocol. That's not necessary. Right. And there was a pleasant chat with them, young girls, right? And so she chatted amiably, and then we sat for dinner, right? Only the King, Queen, I don't know if the Prime Minister was there, I think Prime Minister was there. That's about all, and 2 or 3 of us. Intimate dinner. So one has to decide. That's one. There are many instances. Then she had a very close connection with all in the non-aligned movement, with President Tito, President Nasser, and Nasser died. It was a great shock. I was away in my father-in-law's place at Nigambu. She phoned and said, President Nasser died. The emissary, come, we need to attend the funeral. So that evening we had to fly, and BOSC was the flight to Cairo that very night, and she said, I am going economy class. I said, what? He said, no, I am going economy class. I said, madam, you and the security officer please go first class. It's a long flight and you'll be uncomfortable. We will go economy class. He said, no, I am going economy class with you all. I said, why? No, we are a poor country, we can't afford to all these expenses. So, there was no way. And there was no upgrading. All they did was to put her in the front row of economy class. Right. Then the plane was going to land at Karachi at something like 1:45 in the morning. And she had radioed across, because we had a trade commissioner in Karachi, asking him to contact all the Pakistan government, the Sindh government, and say, please don't come to the airport, because she does not intend disembarking. She wants to sleep on. So she took some tablet or something, and she was a little woozy and she was sleeping. Plane landed at 1:40 or something in the morning, and I saw a whole stream of cars coming. I knew trouble. So I told Dr. Mackie Ratta, to accompany, just a small delegation, and the security officer. I said, Mackie, looks like trouble. And Yes, it was trouble. Chief of Protocol of Sin comes on board, and so finally, Dr. Atwata had to shake her, wake her up. She dabbed her eyes with some wet cloth or whatever it is, and she had to disembark because they said the following had come to the airport and they are awaiting her disembarkation. The governor was in, the chief minister was in, some other senior officials, and the Pakistan government had sent Foreign Secretary Aga Shai, who was very well known in the diplomatic world at the time, all the way from Islamabad on a 1.5 or 2 hour flight to Karachi, just to as a mark of respect for her, to meet her for 35 minutes. And he was there. So there was no way of not disembarking. So is that normal protocol? That is the question. And why? Why? Then when we went to Cairo, we were hardly there 24 hours. We were coming back. That's a story in itself. But the point I want to bring to your notice is, when we finally were going to have lunch, there was no way that we could open our mouth to have lunch. She was mobbed by prime ministers, foreign ministers and others, deputy prime ministers from the Arab world. I mean, I don't think she ate a mouthful. We couldn't eat a mouthful. Finally, to cut a long story short, we had to leave at something like 3 o'clock. Now, this was about 1:30. We had to leave at 3 o'clock in the morning to the airport next day. 1 day stay over in Bombay for the connecting flight or whatever it is, and those days are Bombay, not Mumbai, and to come to Colombo. So I think I'm going on too long, but I'm just finishing. So we scheduled meetings till 1 o'clock. I remember at 1 o'clock in the morning, the last person to come was Yasser Arafat. Right? And till then, Prime Minister, Syria, all one stream after the other, I had to sit and schedule. After that, Security Officer and I did not dare to put our head down and try to get some rest. We would have just blanked out and overslept. We told her to sleep. We couldn't trust the hotel desk because there are so many diplomatic prime ministers and others. We couldn't trust the Cairo, I think Hilton or whatever it is, Nile Hilton hotel desk. So we kept, I had a cold shower, kept going, killing time, because I just did not take a risk of trying to put my head down on a pillow. So, okay, so that was that. And finally, Japan. State visit to Japan. There are so many more, Indonesia and all, I can't talk, no time, but Japan must be told. She was put in what's called the Akasaka Palace. Normally you are given a presidential suite of a hotel. And Akasaka Palace is not given to everybody. As far as I know, 2 years later, the next person to be accommodated in Akasaka Palace was President Reagan of the United States. And we were there, and this lunch, Emperor Hirohito and the Empress hosted a lunch in honor. Now, that was also a breach of protocol, because he was head of government, not head of state. So, okay, there was the lunch. So some of us went, not the whole delegation. Anyway, these delegations were not more than 5 or maximum 6. Only ambassador, myself and Mackie were there. On the Japanese side, believe it or not, there was the Prime Minister. Now, besides the Emperor and Empress, there was Crown Prince Akihito, Princess Michiko, Prince Misaka of the royal family who came for the Buddha Jayanti celebrations. Then the leader of the Diet, President of the Senate, and the Chief Justice, and the Foreign Minister and Prime Minister. Now, there was nobody else left in Japanese society to be invited. And this was, taking a cart and horse through all notions of protocol. So why? So I'm just leaving that question. That's the end of the story, right? As far as I can do. I may have gone over the 15 minutes, but I think it would have been a travesty if this whole thing looked like a checklist which I went through and didn't give you the flavor of what she was and what it was to work with her. Thank you.